Despite having one of the worst album rollouts of all time, Kanye's Donda 2 will continue to be somewhat relevant. In fact, even the largest unfinished version, which is just sitting on stem players, by the way, seems to have gotten in trouble as one of the songs uses an unauthorized sample from an 80s dance hit. Now, will Ye have to remove Flowers from his album? Well, let's dive straight in and find out. First off, who sued Kanye and why? When you think of the word controversy, you think of Kanye West, and even when he's taking a break from his usual social media tirades, he just can't get rid of the trouble that follows him. So what did he do this time around that someone's actually suing him? Well, it has to do with a song on his latest album, Donda 2. Apparently, Flowers, which is supposed to be a single from the LP, uses a sample from the 1986 Marshall Jefferson House track called Move Your Body. Now, you may not recognize the 80s song from its name, but chances are that you've probably listened to it at some point, since people refer to it as the house music anthem as well. So yeah, it seems like Kanye forgot to take permission for the sample and thought that it'd be a good idea to just jam it in. Oh, and according to Billboard, the sample's repeated at least 22 times throughout the song, which to be fair, is a lot. Isn't it bizarre though, how the 45-year-old continues to land himself in hot waters over the most random stuff? Like, wasn't his whole marketing for Donda 2 about advocating for artists' rights? Well, that's what the OG housefather Jefferson thinks as well. In a statement to Billboard, the 62-year-old said that he's been sampled 1,000 times by other artists, but there's a right way of doing things. So something like this from Kanye, who's a fellow black artist from Chicago, is pretty disappointing. Next up, what does the lawsuit actually mean? Obviously, getting sued and actually having to pay any compensation are two very different things. But in this case, things seem pretty clear, as Ye has clearly used Jefferson's sample without his permission. However, if there's anything that he could use to defend himself, it's the fact that the sample is only a single line that says "set me free," which honestly doesn't sound as bad when you think about it. Like, if it had been some actual instrumentation or a longer part of the vocals, then the situation would have been much more dire. With that said, it'd be naive to think that the record label would let Kanye off the hook so easily. In fact, they even dragged English entrepreneur Alex Klein into the whole thing, as he's the brains behind the stem player which is being used to distribute the album. And if you've ever seen or used that little gadget, you'd know that it literally lets you separate audio tracks and play around with them. So in theory, this also applies to the Jefferson sample, which kinda makes things worse for Ye. What does the record label actually want though? Well, for starters, they want the Chicago artist to remove the sample from his song, which should be easy enough. On top of that, they're also asking for damages and attorney's fees. But how much would Kanye have to pay? Now that's where things get complicated, because if the song was on a streaming service, we could have just seen its numbers and calculated just how much money it has made. However, since Donda 2 is only available on the stem player, there really isn't any way to get this information other than to look at the sales from the actual device. And of course, not every sale is made for that one song in particular. So what we're saying is that it's basically impossible to guess how much Ye would have to pay in damages. Still, let's take a look at the player's numbers. According to West himself, Kano had moved 11,000 units of the stem player back in February for $200 each. Obviously, the number would be higher now, but it's still kinda insane how it made over $2 million within 24 hours of Donda 2's release. Now, this isn't the first time that this has happened to Kanye. When it comes to producing fresh beats and sampling stuff, no one does it better than Kanye West. But as Uncle Ben once said, with great power comes great responsibility. Ye, however, might be one of the most irresponsible celebrities out there, so it's not surprising that he's been involved in these copyright infringement lawsuits before this, too. As a matter of fact, on his previous album, Donda, he had a song called Come to Life, which sampled a sermon from Bishop David P. Moten. And while most people loved the song for being uplifting and downright beautiful thanks to its flowing Ghibli-like pianos, Ye screwed up once again by not asking if it was okay for him to include that sample. So yeah, he's been sued on that front too. Oh, and let's not forget the countless other times that he's been in trouble for stuff like this. For instance, he's previously settled lawsuits over the samples used in songs like New Slaves, Ultralight Beam, and even Free from his Cudi collab album in 2018. Kinda weird how he keeps doing this over and over again, huh? But honestly, it may not even be his fault. You see, when it comes to making an album, there's so much stuff involved that things like this can slip through unnoticed. Also, you gotta remember that as Kanye continues to grow, he's not the only guy working on his albums anymore. There are dozens of sound engineers and other artists that come together to make these songs. And at that scale, things like this are actually kinda normal. You know what isn't normal though? Donda 2. And we need to talk about it right now. Seriously, what's up with Donda 2? It's honestly wild to think how Kanye decided to do a couple of listening parties with incomplete songs and just drop the album in its broken state. And what's more, he did it in the most Kanye way possible. If you're a regular person who just likes to listen to music, there's literally no way for you to legally get the album. For that, you'd have to spend a couple $100 and get the stem player, which is a neat little device in theory, but gets boring after you've spent an hour with it. Honestly, this whole rollout has given us the Life of Pablo vibes, but hey, at least the album still made sense at some level. Donda 2, on the other hand, seems like Kanye's neglected child that hasn't gotten any love from him. Like you've literally got songs that are just him mumbling over a badly mixed beat, which is just insane to hear from someone whose entire bread and butter is top-notch production. Also, rather than sticking around and finishing the project like he's done with Donda Part 1 and The Life of Pablo, Kanye has kinda gone AWOL, both from social media and the public. According to those close to him though, it's just a mini hiatus that he's taking to recoup his mind and ponder over all the drama that he created through the whole Pete Davidson thingy. And honestly, good for him, because the guy clearly needs some time off. But hey, if you're a Kanye West fan, this could also be a good sign, because we all know what happens when he decides to go into focus mode. Yep, we get some incredible music from him. With that said though, is there still a chance that people who spent $200 just to buy Donda 2 would get their money's worth out of it? Well, isn't that the million-dollar question? So, is Kanye ever gonna finish Donda 2? Now, as we've already discussed, Donda 2 is a weird album. Like, it's got the bones to be a great trap record that'd fit quite nicely into Kanye's discography, but that's about it. He's not really doing anything new or innovative with this LP, which isn't usual for someone like him. And perhaps the reason for this is the incredibly quick process of making this album, since it's only been a year since the first Donda. At the same time though, that also signifies the lack of care that he's put into it, which seems to be a growing theme in his music. It's almost like he doesn't really even want to make music anymore, but somehow keeps getting peer pressured into it. After all, everyone still wants him to produce beats for them. Oh, and there's this theory going around as well that Donda 2 is more of a collab project for other artists' albums. For instance, we've already seen Keep It Burning make its way to Future's record, and True Love to XXXTentacion's record. So maybe the real Donda 2 was the friends we made along the way? Like, it almost feels like the only reason why we got this record in the first place was that Kanye was controlling the distribution himself, because honestly, we're not sure how this would have gone down if it had been released on Spotify. Yeah, it probably would have been a dumpster fire. Let's just hope he doesn't forget it like he did with Yandhi. That's a wrap for this video. Do you expect Kanye to ever finish Donda 2? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.